I spent 42 years of my life building a successful wedding catering business, so my daughter could have everything I never had. 3 weeks before her big day, she called to tell me I wasn't welcome at her wedding because I'd embarrass her in front of her wealthy in-laws. What she discovered at the venue on her wedding day silenced her entitled attitude forever. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I always dreamed of the day I'd watch my daughter walk down the aisle. As a single mother who built a successful catering business from nothing, I had spent decades imagining how I would help create her perfect wedding day. The elaborate multi-tier cake I'd design myself, the menu I'd craft with my own hands, the personalized touches only a mother with 30 years of wedding industry experience could provide. My company, Sinclair's Fine Catering, was well known throughout New England as the premier choice for high society weddings. I had worked my way up from serving appetizers at small local events to personally catering for governors, celebrities, and even a former president. Despite all that success, I maintained the same humble approach, wearing my grandmother's simple pearl necklace at every event for good luck, keeping my hands rough from honest work, and speaking with the slight Southern accent I never could quite shake from my childhood in rural Georgia. The first time I catered a wedding alone, I was 7 months pregnant with Madison. My husband had left just weeks before, claiming he wasn't ready for fatherhood, and disappearing with our savings. I stood in that kitchen, swollen ankles and aching back, determined that my child would never want for anything. I worked 16-hour days, hired trustworthy staff, saved every penny, and slowly built my reputation. By Madison's 10th birthday, I had enough to buy our first home. By her high school graduation, I could afford to send her to any college she chose. She selected Dartmouth, followed by Columbia Law School, where she met Richard Harrington IV, heir to the Harrington banking fortune. When they got engaged, I cried tears of joy, believing I had succeeded in giving my daughter the life I had dreamed for her. A life where doors opened easily, where people spoke to her with respect rather than the dismissive tones I had endured for years. That dream shattered on a Tuesday afternoon when my phone rang. It was Madison, calling from her luxury downtown Boston apartment that I had helped her secure with my connections. "Mom, we need to talk about the wedding," she said, her voice unnaturally even. "Richard's parents are very particular. They're old Boston money, and everything needs to be perfect." I smiled to myself, thinking she was about to ask for my professional help with last-minute arrangements. After all, I had offered countless times since her engagement, but she had insisted on hiring Celestial Events, the most expensive wedding planner in the city. "What do you need, sweetheart? You know I can handle anything wedding-related. Remember the Spencer Williams wedding last year? We had to replace an entire dessert table with just 2 hours' notice when—" "Mom, stop," Madison interrupted, an edge to her voice I rarely heard. "That's actually what I need to discuss with you." Her silence lingered a beat too long. I could hear her take a deep breath. "I think it would be better if you didn't cater the wedding. In fact, we've decided to go with Larson and Blake instead." I clutched the edge of my kitchen counter, stunned. Larson and Blake was our chief competitor, an inferior service that charged more because they employed staff with British accents. "I don't understand," I managed to say. "Is this about money? You know I would do your wedding at cost." "It's not about money, Mom," Madison cut in. "It's about presentation." "Presentation?" I echoed, not comprehending. "The Harringtons have certain expectations," she continued, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "They expect refinement. Richard's mother specifically asked if you would be attending as a guest only." I forced a laugh. "Well, of course I'll be attending as your mother first and foremost, but you know I'd never be able to stay out of the kitchen entirely. It's who I am, sweetheart." Another painful silence. That's the thing, Mom. I don't think, I don't think you should come to the wedding at all. The words hit me like a physical blow. I sank down onto a kitchen stool, my knees suddenly weak. What are you saying? My voice didn't sound like my own. Mrs. Harrington expressed concerns after meeting you at the engagement dinner, Madison continued, sounding more like a lawyer than my daughter. She felt you might not fit in with their circle. She mentioned your accent, your stories about kitchen disasters, the way you insisted on helping the waitstaff clear plates. That's just being polite, I whispered. It's embarrassing, Mom, Madison said, her voice hardening. You don't understand how these people operate. Everything is about appearances. Richard's father is being considered for a federal judgeship. The wedding will be full of people who could influence his appointment. And I would embarrass you, I finished for her, the realization spreading through me like ice water. Not just me, she insisted. You would feel uncomfortable too. These people can be cruel to outsiders. I'm protecting you as much as myself. Protecting me? After everything I had sacrificed to give her the advantages she now used to exclude me? I remembered the nights I'd slept on a cot in my commercial kitchen because we couldn't afford both rent and daycare. The vacations I'd canceled when large catering jobs came in. The times I'd worn the same dress for years so she could have new clothes for school. Madison, I'm your mother, I said, my voice regaining its strength. I raised you alone. I built a business for you. I've catered hundreds of weddings, including for families just as prominent as the Harringtons. But you've never been a proper guest at those events, she replied coldly. There's a difference between being the help and being family. The help. My own daughter had just called me the help. The help. The words echoed in my mind for hours after Madison hung up. I sat at my kitchen island, surrounded by the wedding magazines I'd been collecting since her engagement, staring at nothing. The antique wall clock, a housewarming gift I'd bought with my first real profit, ticked away the minutes as I struggled to process what had just happened. My phone buzzed repeatedly. Text messages from Madison. Please try to understand. This is about my future. Richard's family has expectations. I need to meet them. I'll come visit you after the honeymoon. We can celebrate privately. I couldn't bring myself to respond. What could I possibly say? That I understood her rejecting me on what should have been one of the most important days we would share. That I accepted being erased because my rough hands and southern drawl might embarrass her new family. Around midnight, I finally moved from the kitchen to my office. This room had been the heart of my business for decades. Walls lined with photographs of stunning wedding cakes I'd created, shelves filled with thank you notes from grateful brides, and a large calendar perpetually marked with upcoming events. In the corner stood a small safe, hidden behind a painting of the Georgia peach orchard where I'd grown up. I dialed the combination with trembling fingers. 10/22/98, Madison's birthday. Inside lay a stack of documents and a velvet jewelry box. I removed both, placing them carefully on my desk. The jewelry box contained my grandmother's complete pearl set, the necklace I wore to every catering job, plus matching earrings and bracelet I'd kept pristine for Madison's wedding day. They were my something old, something borrowed, and something blue all in one. The pearls themselves aged to a subtle cream, set in antique silver with tiny sapphires. I'd promised them to Madison when she was just 8 years old, playing dress-up, in my catering aprons. When you get married, these will be yours, I'd told her, letting her try on the necklace that had draped so elegantly against my grandmother's neck in her wedding photos. They're so pretty, Mama, she'd whispered, handling them with reverence. I closed the velvet box with a snap. Next to it lay the more practical gift I'd been planning. The deed to my business. Sinclair's Fine Catering, valued at just over $4.2 million according to my last financial assessment. I had been preparing for years to transfer ownership to Madison after her wedding. Though she'd chosen law over culinary arts, The business would provide her with passive income and a legacy she could eventually pass down to her own children. My financial advisor had helped me structure everything. Madison would become the owner, while my trusted executive chef and operations manager would handle day-to-day functions. She would receive quarterly distributions without lifting a finger. I would stay on as a consultant for 2 years, then retire completely. It was supposed to be my ultimate gift to her, financial independence from both me and her new husband's family. The ability to walk away from any situation that didn't serve her. The security I had craved my entire life. My gaze drifted to the third document on my desk, a cashier's check for $350,000. My contribution to her wedding and the down payment on whatever home she and Richard chose after their honeymoon. It represented nearly all of my liquid savings, but I hadn't hesitated. What else was money for, if not to give my daughter the perfect start to her married life? I had planned to present all 3 gifts at the rehearsal dinner. I'd even written a speech, something heartfelt about how proud I was of the woman she'd become. How all my years of hard work had been worth it to see her so happy. I could almost hear the clinking of glasses, the polite applause from guests who would finally see me as more than just the woman who prepared their meals. Now, that vision dissolved into nothing. I pulled out my phone and reread Madison's texts. Each one cut deeper than the last, revealing the unbridgeable gap between us. When had this happened? When had my little girl, who once proudly told her elementary school class that her mom made the most beautiful cakes in the whole wide world, become ashamed of me? Was it during her years at Dartmouth, surrounded by classmates who vacationed in the Hamptons and had family names on university buildings? Or perhaps at Columbia Law, where her background became something to overcome rather than celebrate? Or was it only after meeting Richard, whose mother collected art rather than recipes, whose father's hands had never known a day of hard labor? I remembered the engagement dinner clearly. I'd worn my best dress, navy blue, conservative, elegant. I'd practiced speaking more slowly to minimize my accent. I'd even paid for a professional blowout at an upscale salon, trying to tame my naturally curly hair into something sleeker, more sophisticated. Judith Harrington had greeted me with a whoa, practiced smile that never reached her eyes. "So lovely to finally meet you," she'd said, her gaze flicking briefly to my hands that told the story of my life through calluses and slight burns, nails kept practical rather than polished. "Madison speaks so highly of your cooking." She'd said cooking, the way one might say hobby, diminishing my entire career to something quaint and inconsequential. Throughout the dinner, I'd felt increasingly invisible. Richard's parents discussed their recent trip to Tuscany, their membership at the exclusive Bristol Harbor Club, the charity gala where they'd been seated near the governor. They asked Madison thoughtful questions about her law firm, complimenting her recent promotion to junior partner. They engaged Richard in comfortable banter about his investment portfolio and tennis game. Not once did they direct a question to me beyond the perfunctory, "And how is your catering business?" before moving swiftly onward. When I'd attempted to join the conversation, mentioning that I'd catered an event at the very same club they frequented, Judith had smiled tightly before turning to ask the server for more water. Later, when I'd instinctively begun helping clear plates between courses, a habit formed from years in the service industry, I'd caught Madison's mortified expression. She'd tugged my arm gently, whispering, "Mom, please sit down. You're not working tonight." I'd laughed it off then, but the memory stung sharply now. In trying to help, I'd embarrassed her. In being myself, I'd become a liability. The next morning, I called my attorney, Robert Miller. He'd handled my business matters for 15 years and was one of the few people who knew exactly how much I'd sacrificed to build my company. "Nancy, it's been a while. How are you?" His warm voice was a balm to my raw emotions. "I need to make some changes to my estate planning," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "The documents regarding Madison. The business transfer? Is something wrong? Everything's fine, I lied. But I've been thinking about my legacy, and I'd like to make some adjustments. We scheduled a meeting for the following day. That night, I barely slept, wrestling with the decision taking shape in my mind. Was I being petty? Vindictive? Or was I finally seeing my relationship with my daughter clearly for the first time? By morning, I knew what I had to do. Madison had made her choice. She'd decided that the mother who had given her everything wasn't good enough to stand beside her as she married into Boston's elite. She wanted the advantages my hard work had provided without the embarrassment of acknowledging where they came from. I would not force my presence where it wasn't wanted, but neither would I continue pouring my heart, soul, and finances into someone who viewed me as something shameful to be hidden away. At Robert's office, I laid out my new instructions. The $350,000 check would be voided. The business would not be transferred to Madison, but placed in a trust with specific conditions. The family pearls would remain in my possession. "Are you absolutely certain about this?" Robert asked, concern evident in his expression. He had watched Madison grow up, had seen firsthand how I'd built my life around her happiness. "I've never been more certain of anything," I replied, signing where he indicated. "Madison has made it clear that she's embarking on a new life, one where I don't belong. I need to respect her decision and make some decisions of my own." As I left his office, I felt a strange lightness. For the first time in over 20 years, I was thinking about what I wanted, not what Madison needed. It was terrifying. It was liberating. That evening, I finally responded to Madison's text with a single message. "I understand your position and will respect your wishes. You don't need to worry about me attending the wedding." Her reply came almost instantly. "Thank you for understanding, Mom. This means a lot to me. I'll call you soon." No apology. No acknowledgement of what she was asking me to give up. Just relief that I wouldn't be there to embarrass her in front of the Harringtons. I put down my phone and walked to my home office, where a large whiteboard dominated one wall. It was where I'd always planned my major catering events, mapping out every detail to ensure perfection. Now, I wiped it clean and wrote at the top in bold letters, my next chapter. For the first time in decades, I allowed myself to dream of something other than Madison's future. And surprising even myself, I found I had dreams of my own waiting to be discovered. 2 weeks until Madison's wedding. The date, June 17th, had been circled on my calendar in red for nearly a year. Now, it loomed like a deadline for an execution rather than a celebration. I found myself staring at it during breakfast, during my evening glass of wine, during the sleepless hours when regrets tend to surface. The Sunday edition of the Boston Chronicle lay open on my kitchen table, folded to the society page. There it was in elegant script. "Harrington Sinclair wedding promises to be season's most lavish affair." The article detailed the exclusive venue, the designer behind Madison's gown, the 6-piece orchestra that would play during the ceremony. It mentioned Richard's illustrious family history, his Harvard education, his position at his father's investment firm. Madison was described as a rising star in Boston legal circles, graduate of Columbia Law, daughter of Nancy Sinclair. Just that. No mention of my business, my accomplishments, or the fact that I'd raised her single-handedly. I was reduced to a name, an afterthought, while the Harringtons' pedigree was chronicled back 3 generations. I closed the newspaper and pushed it away. No point torturing myself with these details. I had made my peace with not attending, or at least I was trying to. My phone rang, displaying the familiar logo of Sinclair's Fine Catering. It was Sunday. We were closed except for scheduled events. Something must be wrong. "Nancy speaking," I answered, grateful for the distraction. "Ms. Sinclair, I'm so sorry to bother you on a Sunday." It was Thomas, my operations manager for the past 8 years. His voice carried the tension of someone about to deliver unwelcome news. What's happened? Is it the Crawford wedding? We had a mid-sized wedding scheduled that afternoon at the waterfront hotel. No, the Crawford event is proceeding as planned. Well, it's about the Harrington-Sinclair wedding. My grip tightened on the phone. What about it? We're not catering that event. That's just it, Ms. Sinclair. Mrs. Judith Harrington called our office about 30 minutes ago. She was quite upset. Apparently, Larson and Blake have had to cancel due to a major food poisoning incident at an event they catered yesterday. The health department has temporarily shut down their kitchens pending investigation. A surge of vindication flashed through, me quickly replaced by concern. Larson and Blake's negligence could have seriously harmed someone. And Mrs. Harrington wanted to know if we could step in, I concluded, already knowing where this was headed. Yes. She specifically asked if we could take over the catering with just 2 weeks' notice. She mentioned it would be for 200 guests, seated dinner, premium package. Premium package. That would be at least $300 per person, totaling $60,000, minimum, not including the wedding cake, champagne toast, or open bar. One of our largest potential contracts of the season. At Robert's office, I laid out my new instructions. The $350,000 check would be voided. The business would not be transferred to Madison, but placed in a trust with specific conditions. The family pearls would remain in my possession. Are you absolutely certain about this? Robert asked, concern evident in his expression. He had watched Madison grow up, had seen firsthand how I'd built my life around her happiness. I've never been more certain of anything, I replied, signing where he indicated. Madison has made it clear that she's embarking on a new life, one where I don't belong. I need to respect her decision and make some decisions of my own. As I left his office, I felt a strange lightness. For the first time in over 20 years, I was thinking about what I wanted, not what Madison needed. It was terrifying. It was liberating. That evening, I finally responded to Madison's texts with a single message. I understand your position and will respect your wishes. You don't need to worry about me attending the wedding. Her reply came almost instantly. Thank you for understanding, Mom. This means a lot to me. I'll call you soon. No apology, no acknowledgement of what she was asking me to give up. Just relief that I wouldn't be there to embarrass her in front of the Harringtons. I put down my phone and walked to my home office, where a large whiteboard dominated one wall. It was where I'd always planned my major catering events, mapping out every detail to ensure perfection. Now, I wiped it clean and wrote at the top in bold letters, my next chapter. For the first time in decades, I allowed myself to dream of something other than Madison's future. And surprising even myself, I found I had dreams of my own waiting to be discovered. 2 weeks until Madison's wedding. The date, June 17th, had been circled on my calendar in red for nearly a year. Now, it loomed like a deadline for an execution rather than a celebration. I found myself staring at it during breakfast, during my evening glass of wine, during the sleepless hours when regrets tend to surface. The Sunday edition of the Boston Chronicle lay open on my kitchen table, folded to the society page. There it was in elegant script. Harrington-Sinclair wedding promises to be season's most lavish affair. The article detailed the exclusive venue, the designer behind Madison's gown, the 6-piece orchestra that would play during the ceremony. It mentioned Richard's illustrious family history, his Harvard education, his position at his father's investment firm. Madison was described as a rising star in Boston legal circles, graduate of Columbia Law, daughter of Nancy Sinclair. Just that, no mention of my business, my accomplishments, or the fact that I'd raised her single-handedly. I was reduced to a name, an afterthought, while the Harringtons' pedigree was chronicled back 3 generations. I closed the newspaper and pushed it away. No point torturing myself with these details. I had made my peace with not attending, or at least I was trying to. My phone rang, displaying the familiar logo of Sinclair's Fine Catering. It was Sunday. We were closed except for scheduled events. Something must be wrong. Nancy speaking, I answered, grateful for the distraction. Ms. Sinclair, I'm so sorry to bother you on a Sunday. It was Thomas, my operations manager for the past 8 years. His voice carried the tension of someone about to deliver unwelcome news. What's happened? Is it the Crawford wedding? We had a mid-sized wedding scheduled that afternoon at the Waterfront Hotel. No, the Crawford event is proceeding as planned. It's about the Harrington-Sinclair wedding. My grip tightened on the phone. What about it? We're not catering that event. That's just it, Ms. Sinclair. Mrs. Judith Harrington called our office about 30 minutes ago. She was quite upset. Apparently, Larson and Blake have had to cancel due to a major food poisoning incident at an event they catered yesterday. The health department has temporarily shut down their kitchens pending investigation. A surge of vindication flashed through me, quickly replaced by concern. Larson and Blake's negligence could have seriously harmed someone. And Mrs. Harrington wanted to know if we could step in, I concluded, already knowing where this was headed. Yes. She specifically asked if we could take over the catering with just 2 weeks' notice. She mentioned it would be for 200 guests, seated dinner, premium package. Premium package. That would be at least $300 per person, totaling $60,000. Minimum, not including the wedding cake, champagne toast, or open bar. One of our largest potential contracts of the season. I see. My mind raced, professional instincts warring with maternal hurt. And what did you tell her? That I would need to consult with you immediately. She's expecting a call back within the hour. She seemed desperate. I nearly laughed out loud. Judith Harrington, who had looked at me like I was something stuck to the bottom of her designer shoe, was now desperate for my help. The irony wasn't lost on me. Thank you, Thomas. I'll handle this personally. After hanging up, I paced my kitchen, torn between contradictory impulses. The businesswoman in me recognized an excellent opportunity, not just for the revenue, but for the connections and prestige such a high-profile event would bring. The mother in me still smarted from rejection, from being deemed too embarrassing. To witness my only child's wedding. I glanced at the calendar again. June 17th. In my 30 years of catering, I had never turned down a client due to personal feelings. My reputation was built on professionalism, reliability, and the ability to create memorable experiences regardless of circumstances. Could I do it? Could I prepare a magnificent feast for my daughter's wedding? A wedding I wasn't allowed to attend? Would orchestrating the perfect meal from behind the scenes be enough? With a deep breath, I picked up my phone and dialed the number for Harrington Estate. A housekeeper answered, then quickly transferred me when I identified myself. Judith's voice came through crisp and controlled, but with an undercurrent of anxiety I hadn't heard before. Mrs. Sinclair, thank you for returning my call so promptly. I trust your manager explained our situation. He did. I understand you're in need of catering services for Madison and Richard's wedding. Yes. A pause. It's most unfortunate, the timing of this incident with our original caterer. But these things happen, I suppose. These things happened when you hired inferior services based on appearances rather than reputation, I thought, but didn't say. Fortunately, I continued, keeping my voice professionally pleasant, we do have availability on June 17th. We had a cancellation for that date some months ago. A half-truth. We had declined to book anything on Madison's wedding day because I had planned to attend as mother of the bride. Even after being uninvited, I hadn't had the heart to schedule another event. Oh, that is fortunate indeed. Relief colored Judith's tone. I've heard excellent things about your company's work. Madison speaks very highly of your operation. Operation. as if I ran a back-alley business rather than New England's premier catering service. "We take great pride in our work," I replied, allowing a hint of steel to enter my voice. "Our team can certainly accommodate your needs, though the timeline is unusually tight. We typically require a minimum of 6 weeks for events of this scale." "Yes, of course, and we would expect to pay a premium for the rush accommodation," Judith said hurriedly. "Money is no object. The important thing is ensuring the day proceeds flawlessly." For Madison, the words hung unspoken between us. "I understand completely. In fact, given my personal connection to the bride, I would insist on overseeing every detail myself." A lengthy silence followed. "Mrs. Sinclair," Judith finally said, her voice lowered as if sharing a confidence, "I feel I should be direct. Madison has expressed concerns about your presence at the wedding creating potential awkwardness." "I'm aware of Madison's wishes," I replied evenly. "To be clear, I'm offering my professional services, not requesting an invitation. My team and I would remain entirely behind the scenes. Most guests would never even know I was there." Another pause. I could almost hear her weighing her limited options. "Very well," she conceded, "but I must insist that you remain in the kitchen or preparation areas. It would be unfortunate if Madison were distracted on her special day." Distracted, as if seeing her mother would ruin her wedding. I swallowed the hurt and focused on maintaining my professional demeanor. "Of course. Now, regarding the menu, I'll need to know if Madison and Richard have any specific preferences. We typically offer a tasting session, but given the timeline, that won't be necessary," Judith interrupted. "Madison tells me you're familiar with Richard's shellfish allergy and her preference for French cuisine. Beyond that, we trust your expertise. As I said, cost is no concern. We simply want the best." The route, best, which apparently now included my services after their first choice had failed them. "Very well. I'll have a contract and preliminary menu prepared by tomorrow morning for your review. We'll require a 50% deposit to begin work, with the balance due the day before the event." "That's acceptable," Judith agreed, sounding relieved. "And Mrs. Sinclair? Thank you for your discretion in this matter. I'm sure you understand this is what's best for Madison." I ended the call before trust gave way to truth. Before I could ask how humiliating a daughter could possibly be what's best for her. Before I could demand to know what right Judith had to judge me when she had never worked a day in her life. Instead, I opened my laptop and began drafting what would be the most important catering contract of my career. The menu would be flawless, innovative yet classic, memorable without being ostentatious. I would create dishes that complemented the venue, the season, the formality of the occasion. For the next few hours, I lost myself in the familiar comfort of planning. I selected premium ingredients, designed course progressions, contemplated wine pairings. This was my element, the place where I still had control, where my expertise was undeniable. By evening, I had outlined a culinary experience worthy of royalty. 6 courses, beginning with amuse-bouche of caviar on house-made blini, progressing through seasonal soups and salads to a choice of 3 entrees, followed by a cheese course and dessert buffet that would complement the wedding cake. Hurrah! Cake. Madison had always loved my raspberry white chocolate cake with champagne buttercream. As a little girl, she had begged for it at every birthday. Would she want it for her wedding? Or would that be another reminder of her embarrassing mother? Closed my laptop without including the cake in my proposal. Let Judith ask if Madison wanted it. I wouldn't presume. That night, as I prepared for bed, my phone pinged with a text from Madison. "Mom, I heard you're catering the wedding now. Thank you for helping us out of this jam. I really appreciate you staying behind the scenes like we discussed. It means a lot to me and Richard's family." No acknowledgement of the pain she had caused me. No recognition of the irony that I was now good enough to cook for her wedding, but not good enough to attend it. Just gratitude that I would remain hidden, like a shameful secret. I didn't respond. What could I possibly say that wouldn't lead to an argument? That wouldn't make me the difficult, embarrassing mother she already believed me to be? Instead, I placed my phone on the nightstand and turned out the light. In the darkness, I allowed myself to imagine an alternate reality, one where Madison proudly introduced me to the Harringtons, where my work was respected rather than hidden, where I sat at the head table wearing my grandmother's pearls, watching my daughter begin her new life. The fantasy brought no comfort, only a renewed sense of determination. If I couldn't attend my daughter's wedding as her mother, I would ensure that my presence was felt in every bite, every carefully plated dish, every moment of culinary perfection. They might not see me, but they would taste my legacy. And perhaps, just perhaps, Madison would finally understand what she had rejected. The contract with the Harringtons was signed and returned the very next day, along with a deposit check that made even my experienced accountant raise an eyebrow. Judith had approved my proposed menu without a single change, unusual for a client of her exacting standards. Her desperation was showing. For the next 10 days, I threw myself into preparations. My staff noticed the intensity with which I approached this particular event, though none dared ask why. Only my executive chef, Maria, who had been with me for 15 years, ventured to broach the subject as we finalized the sauce recipes. "Nancy," she said quietly, piping a sample of champagne reduction onto a spoon. "Are you sure you want to do this? We could send the team without you." I tasted the sauce, considering the perfect balance of acidity and sweetness before responding. "It's just another job, Maria." She gave me a look that said she knew better. "It's your daughter's wedding, a wedding you told me last month you weren't invited to attend." I busied myself adjusting the flame under a simmering stock. Things change. Business is business. "And hearts get broken," she countered gently. "I've known you too long to believe. You're just doing this for the money or the connections." I met her gaze finally. "I'm doing it because it's what I do. I create beautiful experiences, even for people who don't appreciate the hands that serve them." Maria nodded, understanding what I couldn't quite articulate. This was my way of being present at my daughter's wedding, my final gift to her, even if she didn't deserve it. 3 days before the wedding, while supervising the preparation of items that could be made in advance, I received a text from Madison. "Can you come to the venue tomorrow afternoon? The wedding planner wants to coordinate some details with you, and I'd like to discuss the cake." So, she did want my cake after all. I texted back a simple, "I'll be there at 2 p.m., professional and detached." The Harrington wedding was being held at Lakeside Manor, one of the most prestigious venues in Massachusetts. Set on 20 acres of manicured grounds with a private lake, the historic mansion had been renovated into an exclusive event space that typically booked 2 years in advance. The Harringtons had likely secured it through connections rather than patience. As I drove through the imposing iron gates the following afternoon, I couldn't help but admire the venue's elegance. White roses and peonies lined the circular driveway, their scent filling the air as I parked my car, not my catering van with the Sinclair's logo, but my personal vehicle. Today I was arriving as Nancy Sinclair, not as the caterer. I had dressed carefully in a tailored navy pantsuit that concealed rather than highlighted my curves, paired with modest heels and simple pearl studs, not my grandmother's set, but tasteful nonetheless. My hair was pulled back into a sleek chignon, my makeup subtle but flawless. I looked every inch the successful businesswoman I was, not the embarrassing mother Madison seemed to fear. A young woman in a crisp suit greeted me at the entrance. "Ms. Sinclair? I'm Vanessa from Elegant Occasions. We're coordinating the event. Thank you for coming." She led me through the mansion's grand foyer into a sunroom overlooking the lake, where Madison sat with a slender woman in her 50s, whom I recognized as the wedding planner. No sign of Judith Harrington or Richard, thankfully. Madison looked up when I entered, her expression a complicated mix of emotions: relief, wariness, and something else I couldn't quite place. Guilt, perhaps? "Mom, you're here," she said, standing. For a moment, I thought she might embrace me, but she simply gestured to an empty chair. "This is Celia Thornton, our wedding planner." Celia extended a manicured hand. "A pleasure to finally meet you, Ms. Sinclair. Your reputation precedes you." "Likewise," I replied, taking the offered seat. "I believe we worked the Pemberton Gala last year, though we didn't have the chance to speak directly." "Yes, your lobster bisque was extraordinary," she acknowledged with professional courtesy. "Now, regarding Saturday's event, we need to coordinate timing for service with the reception schedule." For the next 45 minutes, we discussed logistics: when courses would be served, how long to allow between them, which entrees required tableside preparation. Madison remained largely silent, occasionally nodding but offering little input. This was clearly Celia's domain, and by extension, Judith's. When we had covered everything, Celia gathered her notes. "I believe that's all I needed. If you'll excuse me, I need to check on the florist's delivery." She exited gracefully, leaving Madison and me alone for the first time since her fateful phone call. An awkward silence stretched between us. Madison fidgeted with her engagement ring, a massive diamond that must have cost more than my first house. "You wanted to discuss the cake," I prompted finally. "Yes." She seemed relieved to have a safe topic. "I was hoping you might make your raspberry white chocolate cake. It's always been my favorite." "Of course." I kept my voice neutral. "Single tier for cutting, with sheet cakes in the kitchen for serving?" "Actually," Madison hesitated, "I was hoping for a traditional tiered cake." Richard's mother selected a design. She slid a magazine across the table, open to a page featuring an elaborate 6-tier cake adorned with sugar flowers and gold leaf. I studied the image. It was ostentatious, clearly chosen to impress rather than for taste. "This will serve about—" I thought your guest list was 200. "Judith likes the drama of a large cake," Madison admitted, not meeting my eyes. A cake chosen by Judith at a wedding I wasn't welcome to attend. The irony wasn't lost on me. "I can recreate this design with your favorite flavors," I confirmed, keeping my tone professional. "It will. Be ready for delivery at 3 p.m. on Saturday." "Thank you." Madison twisted her ring again. "And Mom, I really do appreciate you stepping in like this. It means a lot to Richard's family." "To Richard's family, not to her." I stood, gathering my notes. "If there's nothing else, I should get back to the kitchen. We have quite a bit of preparation still to do." Madison looked up, something like panic flashing in her eyes. "Actually, would you mind walking the grounds with me for a few minutes? I'd like to show you where the cocktail hour will be held so you can plan your serving stations." It was a flimsy excuse. Celia had already provided detailed floor plans, but I nodded anyway. We walked in silence through French doors onto a stone terrace that overlooked immaculately landscaped gardens sloping down to the lake. A white pavilion had been erected near the water's edge, presumably for the ceremony. "It's beautiful," I offered, trying to ease the tension. "Mom," Madison began abruptly, "there's something I need to tell you." I braced myself, unsure what new hurt might be coming. "Richard and I—" she faltered. "We've been having some difficulties. This wasn't what I'd expected." "What kind of difficulties?" Madison leaned against the stone balustrade, suddenly looking very young and uncertain. "His family is complicated. There are expectations I didn't fully understand when we got engaged." "What kind of expectations?" I asked carefully. "Financial ones, mostly." She sighed. "The Harringtons have money, but it's tied up in trusts and investments. Richard's monthly allowance barely covers our apartment. The wedding is costing a fortune. And his parents expect us to maintain a certain lifestyle afterward, but they're not actually providing the means to do it. I thought of the check I'd voided, the one that would have given them $350,000 to start their married life. Madison had no idea how close she'd come to having that security. "And this is causing problems between you and Richard?" I prompted. "He thinks I should ask you for help," she admitted, a flush creeping up her neck. "He knows your business is successful, and he thinks since you're, from more humble beginnings, you must have cash saved rather than investments." The real revelation hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't about me embarrassing Madison. This was about money. Richard's family's money, or rather the appearance of it. "Let me get this straight," I said slowly. "You uninvited me from your wedding because the Harringtons were embarrassed by my background, but they expected you to ask me for money?" Madison looked away. "It's more complicated than that." "Enlighten me," I said, my voice hardening. "Richard's father is being considered for a federal judgeship, but there have been questions about their finances. They need this wedding to project success and stability, to have the right people see them in the right light. And I'm not the right light," I concluded. "Mom, you don't understand how these people think. Everything is about appearances. The right schools, the right clubs, the right family connections. And you want to be part of that world so badly that you're willing to cut me out of your life?" The hurt I'd been suppressing bubbled to the surface. The mother who raised you alone, who built a business from nothing to give you everything they were born into? Madison had the grace to look ashamed. "It's not about cutting you out. It's about fitting in. Richard loves me, but his parents—" "His parents what?" I pressed. "They had concerns about my background, about where I came from." She hesitated. Who I came from. There it was, the ugly truth I'd suspected but hadn't wanted to believe. Madison wasn't just embarrassed by me. She was trying to erase me, to reinvent herself as someone worthy of the Harrington name. "I see." I felt strangely calm, as if watching the scene from outside my body. "And now that you need my professional services, and potentially my financial support, I'm suddenly acceptable again? That's not fair," Madison protested weakly. "No, what's not fair is raising a daughter who becomes ashamed of the very person who gave her everything." I straightened my shoulders. "Madison, I will cater your wedding because I signed a contract and I honor my commitments. I will make you the most beautiful cake anyone at your wedding has ever tasted. But I will not give you money to maintain a facade for people who think I'm not good enough to sit at their table." Madison's face crumpled. "Mom, please. You don't understand what's at stake here." "I understand perfectly." I turned to leave, then paused. When I started my business, I had nothing but a second-hand oven and recipes my grandmother taught me. No one believed in me except you, a 4-year-old who thought her mama made magic in the kitchen. I built something from nothing, because I wanted you to be proud, to have opportunities I never had. I never imagined you'd be ashamed of how those opportunities came to you." Madison reached for my arm. "I'm not ashamed of you. I'm just trying to adapt to their world. A world that judges people by their pedigree rather than their character isn't a world worth adapting to," I replied. "But that's your choice to make, just as it's my choice to decide what I will and won't accept from my daughter." As I walked away, I heard Madison call after me, her voice small and uncertain. "Mom, what about the cake?" "The cake will be perfect," I called back without turning around. "It's what I do." Driving home, I felt oddly lighter, as if a burden I'd been carrying had finally been set down. The truth hurt, but it was clarifying. Madison hadn't rejected me because I was embarrassing. She'd rejected me because I represented a past she wanted to erase, a background that didn't fit with her aspirational future. And the Harringtons? They were happy to benefit from my labor while judging me unworthy of sitting among them. The hypocrisy was staggering. By the time I reached my kitchen, a plan had begun to form. Not a plan for revenge or public humiliation, but for something more powerful: truth. The kind of truth that could only be served on a silver platter by someone who knew exactly how to make an impression that lasted. That night, I couldn't sleep. My conversation with Madison kept replaying in my mind, each word sharper in memory than when first spoken. I finally gave up around 3 a.m., wrapping myself in my grandmother's old quilt and settling into the window seat in my bedroom that overlooked the garden. The moon cast silver light across the herbs I'd planted: rosemary, thyme, basil, ingredients that had formed the foundation of my earliest recipes. My fingers traced the worn edges of the quilt, each patch a memory from my childhood in rural Georgia. This quilt, like so many things I cherished, told the story of where I came from. A story Madison was now desperate to erase. How had we arrived here? When had my daughter's ambition turned to shame? When had my background, the very thing that had given her opportunities, become something to hide? My mind drifted back 28 years to the day Madison was born. Georgia, 1997, the I. Hospital room was stifling despite the air conditioning that hummed ineffectively in the background. I lay exhausted, a tiny bundle cradled against my chest, marveling at her perfect features. Madison Eliza Sinclair, 7 pounds, 4 ounces, born at 3:27 a.m. after 22 hours of labor. "She's beautiful," the nurse said, adjusting my pillows. "Will your husband be back soon? He just stepped out for coffee." I didn't have the energy to correct her, to explain that Roger wasn't coming back, that he had walked out 3 months earlier when the pregnancy began to limit his freedom. That the last I'd heard, he was in Tampa with a cocktail waitress, having emptied our joint savings account on his way out the door. "It's just us," I said instead, kissing Madison's downy head. The nurse's smile faltered slightly. "Well, you two will do just fine," she said with forced brightness before leaving us alone. "Just us. Me with a community college degree in hospitality management, $342 in my checking account, and a baby who depended on me for everything." The enormity of it was terrifying. "I promise," I whispered to Madison, "you will never want for anything. I will give you the world." I had no idea then how difficult that promise would be to keep. Atlanta, 2002. "Mama, look, I made you a cake." 5-year-old Madison proudly held up a mud pie decorated with dandelions and pebbles. Her sundress was smeared with dirt, her dark curls, so like mine, escaping from once neat pigtails. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," I said, setting down the heavy box I'd been carrying. We were moving again, the 3rd time in 2 years, each move taking us to a slightly better apartment in a slightly better neighborhood with slightly better schools. "Is this one forever?" Madison asked, looking up at the modest 2-bedroom unit that represented a significant upgrade from our previous place. "For a good long while," I promised, though I had no way of knowing if that was true. The catering business I'd started from my kitchen was growing, but slowly. I was still taking side jobs, waiting tables and bartending to make ends meet. Later that night, after tucking Madison into bed in her new room, the first she wouldn't have to share with me, I sat at our second-hand kitchen table and spread out my ledger. The numbers were improving, but the margins were still razor-thin. I needed more clients, more upscale events, a real commercial kitchen. My eye caught on a flyer I'd picked up that day. "Small business loans available now, minimum credit score required." My credit had been destroyed after Roger left me with his unpaid debts. Traditional financing wasn't an option. I rubbed my eyes, exhaustion threatening to overwhelm me. Then I heard a small sound from the hallway. "Mama?" Madison stood there in her faded princess nightgown, clutching the stuffed rabbit she'd had since infancy. "Are you sad?" "No, baby," I said, quickly putting away the bills. "Just thinking about grown-up things." She patted over and climbed into my lap, her small body warm against mine. "I can help," she offered solemnly. "I can make real cakes someday, not just mud ones." I laughed, hugging her close. "You know what? I believe you could, and I'd be very proud to have you as my assistant." "Your partner," she corrected, with the confidence only a child could possess. "We'll be famous, and people will come from all over to eat our cakes." "All over, huh?" "All over the whole wide world," she declared, spreading her arms wide. "And we'll be rich and have a big house and never have to move again." "That sounds wonderful," I said, carrying her back to bed. "We'll work on that together." As I tucked her in again, I made another silent promise. Madison would have opportunities I never had. She would go to college. She would never know the gnawing fear of choosing between electricity and groceries. She would have stability, security, and choices. Whatever it took, I would make that happen. Boston, 2010. "Mom, I got in. I got in." Madison burst through the door of our apartment, waving an envelope emblazoned with the logo of Phillips Exeter Academy, one of the most prestigious prep schools in the country. At 13, she was already showing signs of the beautiful woman. She would become tall for her age, with my dark curls but her father's hazel eyes, sharp intelligence evident in her expression. "Let me see." I wiped my hands on a dish towel and took the letter. Full academic scholarship to their summer program, with potential for admission to the school itself if she performed well. "This is amazing, sweetheart." I hugged her tightly, pride swelling in my chest. The catering business had finally taken off after I'd secured a loan through a women's business initiative. We'd moved to Boston 3 years earlier for the opportunities. It offered better schools for Madison, more upscale clients for me. "Jessica Harrington goes there," Madison said, her eyes shining. "Her dad is some big-shot banker. She said their dorms are like fancy hotel rooms and they have a lake and riding stables and—" "Whoa, slow down," I laughed. "The summer program doesn't include the riding stables, I'm afraid. But it's an incredible opportunity." Madison sobered suddenly. "It says parents are invited for the final weekend showcase. You'll come, right? Even if you have events scheduled?" "Wild horses couldn't keep me away," I promised. "I'll make sure Maria can handle any events that weekend." Madison beamed, then glanced at the kitchen counter where I'd been preparing samples for a potential new client. "Is that your famous shrimp remoulade?" "It is. Want to be my taste tester?" She nodded eagerly, and for the next hour we worked side by side in the kitchen, adjusting seasonings, discussing presentation ideas. These were my favorite moments, sharing my passion with my daughter, watching her absorb techniques and offer insights with remarkable intuition for someone so young. "You know," I said as we packaged the samples, "you have a real talent for this. If you ever wanted to join the business after college—" "Mom," Madison interrupted, rolling her eyes good-naturedly. "I'm going to be a lawyer, remember? Or maybe a doctor. Something professional." "Catering is professional," I pointed out, trying not to feel stung. "You know what I mean," she said, suddenly seeming older. "Something where people don't look at your hands and assume you never went to college." I glanced down at my hands, hard-working hands with short nails and the occasional burn scar. Hands that had provided for us, that had created beauty from simple ingredients, that had lifted us from poverty to middle-class comfort. "There's no shame in working with your hands," I said quietly. "Some of the most brilliant creative people I know wear their labor on their skin." Madison had the grace to look embarrassed. "I didn't mean it like that. Your work is amazing. I want something different for myself." "Of course you do," I assured her. "And you can have anything you set your mind to. I'm just saying all doors are open to you, including this one, if you ever want it." But I could already see the determination in her eyes. Madison didn't want my world. She wanted something shinier, something that carried more prestige. And Wasn't that exactly what I had worked so hard to give her? The freedom to choose? Boston, 2015. Mom, is my dress pressed? Madison called from her bedroom. The interview is at 3 and I need to leave in 20 minutes. I hung up from my call with a difficult client and hurried to Madison's room, where I'd laid out her navy blue interview suit an hour earlier. All ready to go, pressed and lint-rolled. At 18, Madison was stunning, poised, articulate, and fiercely intelligent. Her college applications had all been submitted, but this interview was for a special scholarship at Harvard that would cover not just tuition, but living expenses as well. She emerged from the bathroom, hair blown straight and makeup subtle but flawless. "How do I look? Professional enough?" "You look perfect," I said truthfully. "Harvard would be lucky to have you." She slipped into the suit jacket I held out for her, checking her reflection in the mirror. "I'm so nervous. What if they ask something I can't answer?" "Then you'll say something honest and thoughtful, like you always do." I straightened her collar. "You've prepared for this. You're ready." Madison took a deep breath, then frowned slightly. "Mom, you're not planning to tell the interviewer about the business, are you?" I blinked, confused. "Why would I? I'm just driving you there and waiting outside." "It's just—" She hesitated. "Some of the other applicants come from really impressive backgrounds. Parents who are surgeons or professors or executives." Understanding dawned, leaving a cold feeling in my stomach. "And you're worried that a caterer mother might not measure up?" "No, I didn't mean—" She sighed. "I'm just nervous. These scholarships are so competitive, and I don't have the family connections some other applicants have. If they ask about my background, you tell them the truth," I said firmly. "That you're the daughter of a successful small business owner who built something from nothing. That you've worked alongside me since you were old enough to stir batter, learning firsthand about entrepreneurship, customer service, and management." Madison nodded, but I could see the doubt in her eyes. "You're right. I'm overthinking this." On the drive to Harvard, she was quiet, reviewing her notes and mentally preparing. I kept my eyes on the road, trying not to dwell on her earlier comments. She was just nervous, I told myself. She didn't mean to imply she was ashamed of me or our life together. As we pulled up to the imposing brick building where her interview would take place, I saw several other applicants arriving with their parents. Men in expensive suits, women in designer dresses, all exuding confidence and belonging. Madison's hand tightened on her portfolio. "Maybe you should just drop me off," she suggested, not meeting my eyes. "Parking will be a nightmare, and there's no need for you to wait around for 2 hours." I swallowed my hurt. "If that's what you prefer?" "It's just more practical," she insisted, already opening her door. "I'll text you when I'm done." I watched. Her walk away, shoulders back, chin high, every inch the confident Harvard applicant. In that moment, I recognized that Madison wasn't just seeking education or advancement. She was seeking transformation. She wanted to enter a world where her humble beginnings would be erased, where she would be accepted as belonging among the elite by birthright rather than by effort, and I, with my Southern accent and working-class background, was a reminder of everything she wanted to leave behind. As dawn broke over my garden, bringing me back to the present, I wiped away tears I hadn't realized I'd been shedding. The signs had been there all along. Madison's gradual distancing, her reluctance to bring college friends home, her increasingly rare mentions of my business in conversation. I had told myself she was just growing up, establishing her independence. But the truth was simpler and more painful. Madison had been ashamed of me for years. The wedding exclusion wasn't a sudden rejection, but the culmination of a long, slow pulling away. And yet I had continued to sacrifice, to support her dreams, to fund her ascent into a world that looked down on people like me. I had been so determined to give her everything I never had that I hadn't noticed when everything began to include a different kind of mother. The realization didn't diminish my love for her, but it clarified something important. I had been complicit in my own erasure, allowing Madison to compartmentalize me as a source of financial and practical support while hiding me from the life she was building. That ended now. I would cater her wedding as promised, with all the professionalism and excellence my reputation demanded. But I would no longer accept being treated as an embarrassment, a secret to be hidden away. It was time for Madison and the Harringtons to see exactly who I was, in all my unvarnished, self-made glory. The day before Madison's wedding dawned bright and clear, a perfect June morning that promised ideal weather for the celebration to come. I had been up since 4 a.m., overseeing final preparations in the commercial kitchen where my team worked with practiced precision, each person focused on their specific tasks, from saucing to garnishing to packing transport containers designed to keep everything at optimal temperature. "Nancy, these look fantastic," Maria commented, inspecting the rows of appetizers awaiting their final garnish. "The prosciutto-wrapped figs with blue cheese mousse might be your best creation yet." I nodded distractedly, checking items off my master list. "Make sure they stay at exactly 41 degrees until service. Any warmer and the mousse will lose structure." "We've got it under control," Maria assured me. "You should head to the venue for the final walkthrough. We're right on schedule here." I hesitated, reluctant to leave my kitchen sanctuary for the emotional minefield that awaited at Lakeside Manor. Here, I was Chef Sinclair, the respected professional whose word was law. There, I would be the embarrassing mother, hidden away, like a shameful secret. "Go," Maria insisted gently. "We've catered hundreds of weddings. I promise the kitchen won't explode while you're gone." "It's not the kitchen I'm worried about," I muttered, but I untied my apron nonetheless. "Call me immediately if there are any issues with the delivery van. The transmission was making that noise again yesterday." 30 minutes later, I pulled into Lakeside Manor's service entrance, deliberately bypassing the main drive where florists, decorators, and other vendors would be arriving through the grand gates. My catering van, freshly washed but still showing its age, would remain hidden around back, just as I was expected to. The event coordinator, a harried young man with a clipboard and Bluetooth earpiece, greeted me with obvious relief. "Miss Sinclair? Thank you for coming. Mrs. Harrington has been asking for you." "Has she?" I kept my voice neutral, though I couldn't imagine why Judith would suddenly want to speak with me directly. Our communication had been limited to terse emails about menu adjustments and timing. "She's in the main dining room with the decorator. I'll let her know you're here." "No need," I said, already heading toward the kitchen. "I should check the facilities first. Please tell Mrs. Harrington I'll find her when I'm done." The kitchen was state-of-the-art, as expected from a venue of this caliber. 6-burner commercial ranges, multiple convection ovens, expansive prep areas, and walk-in refrigerators large enough to store everything we'd need. I was making notes about electrical outlet placement when I heard the distinctive click of expensive heels on tile. "There you are." Judith Harrington's voice carried that particular blend of irritation and condescension I'd come to associate with her. "I've been waiting for half an hour." I turned, taking in her immaculate appearance, blonde hair swept into a perfect chignon, pearl gray designer suit that probably cost more than a month's rent on my first apartment, diamonds glittering at her ears and throat. She looked like wealth personified, every detail calculated to communicate status and breeding. "I apologize for the delay," I said, not sounding apologetic at all. "I needed to familiarize myself with the kitchen before our equipment arrives." She waved this away as irrelevant. "We need to discuss the reception entrance. The ice sculpture was supposed to be delivered at noon, but they're saying it can't arrive until 4, which is cutting it entirely too close." I blinked. "Ice sculpture? That wasn't in our contract." "Not your ice sculpture," she clarified impatiently. "The swan centerpiece for the champagne fountain. But since you'll have staff setting up in that area, I need to coordinate timing. I see? I made a note on my tablet. We'll ensure our staff works around the delivery. Is there anything else? Judith hesitated, then lowered her voice slightly. Yes, actually, it's about the servers. Is there a problem with my staff? I asked, a protective edge entering my voice. My team was impeccably trained and professional. Not exactly. It's just... She glanced around as if worried about being overheard. Madison mentioned that you often work alongside your staff at events. I want to make sure that won't be happening tomorrow. Ah, there it was, the real reason for this conversation. Mrs. Harrington, I said carefully. I typically supervise all aspects of service for events of this caliber. It ensures quality control. Yes? Well. She straightened her already perfect posture. In this case, I must insist that you remain entirely behind the scenes. Many of our guests are, shall we say, persons of influence. Federal judges, state representatives, business leaders. It would be awkward if they were to see you serving food at your daughter's wedding. The casual cruelty of her words hung in the air between us. Not, it would be awkward for Madison if her mother were seen serving food, but awkward for the Harringtons and their prestigious guests to be confronted with the reality of who I was. I, working woman who wasn't ashamed to do whatever needed doing. I understand completely, I said, my voice cool and professional. Rest assured, Mrs. Harrington, I have no intention of embarrassing Madison tomorrow. I will oversee operations from the kitchen, and our service staff will handle all guest interactions. Relief visibly washed over her. Excellent. Then I believe everything is in order. Almost. I consulted my tablet again. There's the matter of the final payment. The contract stipulates balance due today, and I haven't received it yet. Judith's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Of course. Richard Sr. is handling that. I believe he planned to stop by your office later today. My office will be closed as we're preparing for tomorrow's event, I replied. However, I accept cashier's checks or wire transfers. I'll need the balance before we begin setup at 9 a.m. I'm sure that won't be a problem, she said smoothly, though something in her expression suggested otherwise. Richard will contact you directly to arrange it. As if summoned by his name, a tall silver-haired man in a bespoke suit appeared in the kitchen doorway. Richard Harrington Sr. looked exactly like an older version of his son. Same strong jaw, same confident bearing, same air of entitled expectation. Judith, the florist has a question about the ceremony arrangements, he said before noticing me. Ah, you must be Mrs. Sinclair. Ms., I corrected automatically. Nancy Sinclair. He extended his hand with practiced charm. Richard Harrington, I understand we have you to thank for saving our celebration after that unfortunate business with Larson and Blake. I shook his hand briefly. Happy to help. Your wife and I were just discussing the final payment due today. Yes, about that. His smile remained fixed, but his eyes turned calculating. I was hoping we might discuss a slight adjustment to the terms. I had been in business long enough to recognize the opening move in a negotiation I hadn't agreed to. The terms were set in the contract both parties signed. The balance of $37,450 is due today. Richard chuckled as if I'd said something amusing. Of course, but given the circumstances and the family connection, I thought perhaps we might discuss a family discount. A family discount. I repeated the words flatly. Nothing substantial. Say 20%? After all, this is your daughter's wedding. His tone suggested he was being incredibly generous in making this offer. I looked from Richard to Judith, who was studiously examining her manicure, and felt a sudden clarity. This, finally, was the real Harrington family, wealthy in appearance but trying to save $7,490 by leveraging my maternal feelings. The same people who deemed me too embarrassing to attend their son's wedding were now expecting special treatment because of our family connection. The irony was almost too perfect. "Mr. Harrington," I said evenly, "Sinclair's Fine Catering does not offer discounts based on family connections. In fact, given the rush nature of this contract and the premium ingredients requested, I would normally have charged a 20% premium. I waived that out of consideration for Madison." His smile disappeared. "Now see here. The contract price stands," I continued firmly. "Payment is due in full before setup begins tomorrow morning. If that presents a problem, I'm sure Celia can recommend several pizza delivery places that might be able to accommodate your event on short notice." Judith gasped. "You wouldn't dare." "I'm a businesswoman, Mrs. Harrington. I don't make threats. I state terms. The terms of our agreement are clear, and I expect them to be honored." Richard's face had reddened slightly, but he recovered quickly. "No need to be difficult. I was merely suggesting a mutually beneficial arrangement." "There's nothing mutual about asking for free services," I pointed out, "especially from someone you've deemed unsuitable to attend the event as a guest." A tense silence followed as my words hit their mark. Judith shifted uncomfortably while Richard's expression hardened into something more calculating. "You're putting us in a difficult position," he said finally. "The wedding is tomorrow." "Yes, it is," I agreed. "And you're putting me in the position of having purchased $15,000 in premium ingredients and dedicated my entire staff to an event that you're now suggesting you might not pay for in full." "I never said we wouldn't pay," he backpedaled quickly. "I was simply exploring options." "The option is to pay as agreed or cancel the contract," I stated. "Those are the only choices available to you." Richard and Judith exchanged glances, some unspoken communication passing between them. Finally, Richard nodded stiffly. "The payment will be made in full, as agreed," he conceded. "I'll have my assistant wire the funds this afternoon." "Excellent," I said, allowing myself a small smile. "Then I believe our business here is concluded for today. My team will arrive at 9 tomorrow morning to begin setup." As I turned to leave, Judith called after me. "And you'll remember our agreement about staying in the kitchen?" I paused at the door. "Mrs. Harrington, I've been catering high-profile events for over 20 years. I know exactly where I belong." The statement hung in the air, loaded with meaning neither of them fully grasped. I did indeed know where I belonged, and it wasn't hiding in shame behind a kitchen door. Outside in the parking lot, I leaned against my van for a moment, letting the tension drain from my shoulders. The encounter had confirmed what I'd already suspected. The Harringtons were more facade than substance. They had the trappings of wealth and the attitudes of privilege, but underneath lurked insecurity and financial strain they were desperate to hide. And Madison, my brilliant, ambitious daughter, had chosen their world of appearances over our world of authenticity. She had gambled her happiness on fitting into a family that measured worth by pedigree rather than character. My phone buzzed with a text from Maria. "Cake layers all perfect. Decorations on schedule. Everything under control here." At least something was going right. The cake, 6 tiers of raspberry white chocolate perfection, would be my masterpiece. I had poured all my skill, all my artistry, all my complicated love for my daughter into its creation. Even if Madison never appreciated the hands that had crafted it, I knew it would be the finest cake I'd ever made. As I drove back to my kitchen, a plan began taking clearer shape in my mind. Not revenge, not sabotage. I would never compromise my professional standards or risk Madison's happiness, no matter how deeply she had hurt me. But perhaps there was a way to ensure that my presence at the wedding wasn't entirely erased, that the truth of who I was and what I had built couldn't be so easily dismissed. The Harringtons wanted to hide me away, to pretend that Madison had emerged fully formed into their rarefied world without the stain of working-class origins. But some truths couldn't be covered up with fancy clothes or prestigious connections. Tomorrow I would make sure of that. The morning of Madison's wedding arrived with picture-perfect weather, clear blue skies, gentle breeze, temperature hovering at an ideal 72 degrees. I had slept barely 3 hours, but adrenaline kept me sharp as I directed my team loading the catering vans. By 8:45 a.m., we were pulling into Lakeside Manor's service entrance, a well-orchestrated caravan of vehicles, containing everything needed to feed 200 guests a 6-course gourmet meal. Equipment team first, I instructed as we parked. Refrigerated items second. Let's move. My staff responded with practiced efficiency, unloading warming cabinets, portable burners, and serving equipment. Within 30 minutes, we had transformed the venue's kitchen into a satellite version of our own, with stations set up for each course and backup systems in place for any possible contingency. The wire transfer came through. My accountant texted at 9:30. Full amount. At least the Harringtons had honored that part of our agreement. I pushed thoughts of them aside and focused on what I did best, creating culinary perfection. By noon, preparations were well underway. The ceremony wouldn't begin until 4 p.m., but guests would start arriving at 3:30. We needed everything ready for the cocktail hour that would follow immediately after Madison and Richard exchanged vows. I was supervising the plating of appetizer components when Celia, the wedding planner, burst into the kitchen looking harried. "Ms. Sinclair, thank God you're here. We have a situation." "What kind of situation?" I asked, not looking up from the delicate quenelle of caviar I was placing atop a blini. The florist delivered baby's breath centerpieces instead of white roses. "Mrs. Harrington is," she lowered her voice, "having what one might call a meltdown in the bridal suite. The ceremony is in 3 hours, and we have no centerpieces." I considered this for a moment. Technically, centerpieces weren't my problem. My contract covered food and service, nothing more. But I had more experience handling wedding crises than anyone else in the building. "Tell Mrs. Harrington that I can create food-based centerpieces if she's amenable," I offered. We brought extra materials for garnish that could be repurposed. Relief flooded Celia's face. "That would be incredible. What did you have in mind?" "Small arrangements of fresh herbs, edible flowers, and fruit. Elegant, fragrant, and appropriate for a dinner setting. They won't be traditional floral centerpieces, but they'll be beautiful." "I'll suggest it immediately," Celia said, already heading for the door. "Though," she hesitated, "Mrs. Harrington may resist solutions coming from, well, from the help?" I finished for her, my voice deliberately light. She had the grace to look embarrassed. "I didn't say that. You didn't have to." I returned to my work. Make the offer or don't. Either way, my team and I will be ready when it's time to serve. 15 minutes later, Judith Harrington herself appeared in the kitchen doorway, her perfect composure noticeably frayed around the edges. Her makeup couldn't quite conceal the redness around her eyes, and her hands trembled slightly. "Ms. Sinclair," she began stiffly, "Celia mentioned you might have a solution to our centerpiece disaster." I wiped my hands on a towel and approached her, maintaining a professional distance. "I can create food-based arrangements using materials we already have here. They won't be what you originally envisioned, but they'll be elegant and appropriate." "And you can have them ready in time?" Doubt colored her voice. "I wouldn't have offered otherwise," I replied simply. She studied me for a long moment, calculation evident in her expression. "Very well. I suppose we have no choice at this point." "Actually, you do have choices," I corrected her. "You could use candles alone, or repurpose ceremony flowers, or even leave the tables without centerpieces entirely. People are here for Madison and Richard, not table decorations." Judith looked startled, as if the idea that guests might not notice or care about centerpieces had never occurred to her. "That's not... We can't possibly... Everything needs to be perfect." "Perfect is a matter of perspective, Mrs. Harrington." I turned to Maria. "Can you take over here? I'll work on the centerpieces." For the next hour, I channeled my creative energy into crafting 20 stunning arrangements, each one a small work of art featuring rosemary sprigs, lavender stems, edible orchids, carved fruit, and twisted lemon peels, all anchored in clear glass bowls with river stones I'd brought for an entirely different purpose. They were unconventional, but undeniably beautiful. When I finished the last one, I found Judith hovering nearby, watching with poorly concealed amazement. "These are—" She seemed to struggle for words. "These will do nicely." From Judith Harrington. This qualified as effusive praise. "I'm glad they meet your approval," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "My staff will place them once the tables are set." She nodded, then hesitated as if wanting to say something more. After an awkward pause, she simply turned and left. No thank you, no acknowledgement of the extra effort I'd made to save her reception. Just the entitled expectation that of course I would fix her problem. I was the help, after all. At 2:30 p.m., I stepped outside for a brief moment of fresh air, needing to escape the controlled chaos of the kitchen. The ceremony space had been transformed into something out of a fairy tale. White chairs with satin bows faced an elegant pergola draped with flowing fabric and white roses. Apparently, some flowers had arrived correctly, all overlooking the sparkling lake. Soon Madison would walk down that aisle without me. No mother of the bride procession, no front row seat, no proud tears as she exchanged vows. Just me in the kitchen, making sure the shrimp didn't overcook. I was about to return inside when I spotted a familiar figure hurrying across the lawn. Madison. Still in jeans and a button-down shirt, her hair in rollers, looking panicked. She was headed toward a cottage behind the main building that served as the bridal dressing area. Acting on instinct, I followed her. Whatever had her rushing around with barely an hour before she needed to be dressed might be something I could help with, mother of the bride or not. I knocked on the cottage door, then pushed it open without waiting for a response. "Madison, is everything all right?" She whirled around, eyes wide with surprise. "Mom, what are you doing here? I thought you'd be in the kitchen." "I saw you running across the grounds looking upset," I explained. "Is something wrong?" Madison's composed facade crumbled. "Everything's wrong. The makeup artist canceled at the last minute. Some family emergency. My maid of honor is stuck in traffic on the highway. And I just found out Richard's been texting his ex-girlfriend all week." She collapsed onto a plush ottoman, tears threatening to ruin the makeup she'd apparently had to apply herself. "I don't know what to do," she whispered. "I have 45 minutes to finish getting ready, and I can't even get my hair right." I set aside all the hurt and rejection of the past weeks and simply became her mother again. "Let me help." "You can do wedding hair?" Madison looked skeptical despite her distress. "Sweetheart, I've been working at weddings for 30 years. I've pinned up more bridal hairdos than I can count when stylists ran late or things went wrong." I moved behind her, gently removing the rollers. "Where's your veil?" She pointed to a box on the vanity. "I was going to wear it with a low updo, but I can't manage it myself. I know exactly how to style it." I began brushing out her dark curls, so like mine had been at her age. "As for your makeup, it looks beautiful already. Just needs a bit of finishing." As I worked, the tension between us gradually eased. This was familiar territory. Me taking care of Madison, solving problems, making things right. For a little while, we could pretend that nothing had changed, that she hadn't rejected me from her wedding, that I was here as her mother rather than her caterer. "Mom," she said after a few minutes of comfortable silence, "I need to tell you something." I continued pinning her hair, keeping my voice light. "What's that?" "Richard and I had a huge fight last night." Her voice trembled slightly. "About money." I waited, letting her continue at her own pace. "His parents' investment firm isn't doing as well as everyone thinks. They're leveraged to the hilt. This wedding," she gestured around at the luxury cottage, "is all for show. They're spending money they don't have to maintain appearances." "And that bothers you?" I asked carefully. Madison sighed. It bothers me that they expect me to do the same, to live beyond our means to keep up the Harrington image. Richard says it's just how things work in their world. You project success until you achieve it. I thought of Richard Harrington Sr., trying to negotiate a discount on his son's wedding catering at the last minute. Sometimes the appearance of wealth isn't the same as actual financial stability. I know that now, Madison admitted quietly. And when I suggested we scale back our plans for after the wedding, maybe rent instead of buy in Beacon Hill, postpone the European honeymoon, Richard got angry. He said I was being common. The word hung between us, loaded with meaning. Common, I repeated, securing another pin in her elegant updo. Like your mother. Madison winced. I'm sorry about all that, Mom. I got caught up in their world, their expectations. I convinced myself that fitting in with the Harringtons was the most important thing. More important than having your mother at your wedding? The question slipped, out before I could stop it. Madison's eyes met mine in the mirror, filled with shame. I was wrong. So wrong. And now I'm marrying into a family that looks down on people like us, people who actually work for a living, while secretly being broke themselves. You don't have to go through with this, I said softly, placing the final pins and reaching for her veil. If you're having doubts, if Richard isn't who you thought he was, that's just it, Madison interrupted. I don't know if my doubts are about Richard or about the life I thought I wanted. I've spent so much time trying to become someone else, someone who belongs in their world, that I'm not sure who I am anymore. I carefully attached the veil to her updo, then stepped back to admire the effect. She looked stunning, elegant, sophisticated, and unmistakably my daughter. You are Madison Eliza Sinclair, I told her firmly. Daughter of a woman who built something from nothing, graduate of Harvard Law, brilliant, determined, and capable of creating any life you choose, with or without the Harrington name. Tears welled in her eyes. I've been horrible to you, ungrateful, ashamed of the very things I should have been proudest of. Yes, I agreed, not sugarcoating it. You have. Can you forgive me? She asked in a small voice. I sighed, emotions warring within me. I will always love you, Madison. But forgiveness isn't instantaneous. You made choices that hurt me deeply. Choices you're only reconsidering now that you've seen behind the Harringtons' perfect facade. She nodded, accepting the hard truth of my words. What would you do if you were me? Right now, with 200 guests waiting and caterers preparing and everything in motion? I considered the question carefully. This wasn't about what I wanted for her, but what she needed to hear. I would ask myself one question, I said finally. Am I marrying Richard because I love him, flaws and all, enough to build a life together? Or am I marrying the idea of becoming Mrs. Richard Harrington IV and everything that represents? Madison was silent for a long moment, staring at her reflection in the mirror. The perfect bride, ready to step into a picture-perfect life that might be built on illusions and debt. I don't know the answer, she admitted finally. Then perhaps that is your answer. I squeezed her shoulder gently. Whatever you decide, I need to get back to the kitchen. We'll be serving your guests in a few hours, regardless of whether there's a ceremony or not. Mom, wait. Madison caught my hand as I turned to leave. Stay, please. Be my mother today, not my caterer. I want you at my wedding, if there's going to be a wedding at all. The invitation, coming so late and wrapped in uncertainty, brought a bittersweet ache to my chest. Madison, your future in-laws have made it very clear. I don't care what they think anymore, she interrupted fiercely. This is my wedding, our wedding, and I want my mother there. A knock at the door interrupted us. Celia, the wedding planner, poked her head in, looking frazzled. Madison, thank goodness, your hair looks amazing, but we have another problem. The justice of the peace just called. He's been in a minor car accident and can't make it. He's fine, but we have no one to perform the ceremony. Madison looked from Celia to me, seeming oddly calm in the face of this new disaster. It seems the universe is giving me signs. We can find another officiant, Celia assured her quickly. I have calls out already. That won't be necessary, Madison said, standing. I need to speak with Richard alone, right now. As she swept past Celia, head high and newly confident, I couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. Whatever she decided, Madison was finally recognizing that some things mattered more than appearances. I turned to follow her out, but Celia blocked my path. Ms. Sinclair? I hate to ask, but the finger foods for cocktail hour are being handled by my extremely competent staff, I finished for her. Right now, I'm not here as your caterer. I'm here as mother of the bride. Celia's eyes widened. But Mrs. Harrington specifically said, I don't particularly care what Mrs. Harrington said, I interrupted, stepping past her. My daughter has invited me to her wedding, and I intend to be there, one way or another. As I walked back toward the main building, I spotted Madison and Richard in what appeared to be an intense conversation by the lake's edge. Their body language spoke volumes, her animated gestures, his defensive posture. Whatever was happening, a decision was being made that would shape both their futures. And for the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope that my daughter might be finding her way back to the truth of who she was and what really mattered. Appearances be damned. I stood at the edge of the garden, watching Madison and Richard from a distance. Their conversation had escalated into what appeared to be a full-blown argument, her hands gesturing emphatically, his shoulders increasingly rigid. I couldn't hear their words, but the intensity was unmistakable. What's happening down there? Judith Harrington appeared at my side, her voice tight with concern. The ceremony is supposed to start in 20 minutes. Why isn't Madison dressed yet? I turned to face her, struck by how small she suddenly seemed despite her designer outfit and perfect styling. I believe Madison and Richard are having an important conversation about their future? Now? Judith's voice rose in panic. There are 200 guests arriving. The governor is coming. This isn't the time for conversations. Actually, Mrs. Harrington, I'd say this is exactly the right time. Before vows are exchanged, not after. Judith's gaze shifted from the couple by the lake to me, her eyes narrowing. You were supposed to stay in the kitchen. Did you do this? Did you talk her out of marrying my son? The accusation was so absurd I almost laughed. Your son seems perfectly capable of creating doubts all on his own. I understand he's been texting his ex-girlfriend this week? Judith paled slightly. That's nothing. A misunderstanding. Perhaps, I allowed. But it's hardly the only issue at hand. What's that supposed to mean? She drew herself up, trying to regain her usual air of superiority. It means that marriage should be built on honesty, not appearances. I met her gaze directly. Madison knows about your family's financial situation. She knows this wedding is an expense you can't really afford. How dare you? Judith hissed, glancing around frantically to ensure no one had overheard. Our finances are none of your concern. They became my concern when you used them as a reason to exclude me from my daughter's wedding, I replied evenly. When you deemed me too common to be seen by your prestigious guests, all while counting on my labor to create the illusion of luxury you can barely afford. Judith's composure cracked, revealing the desperate woman beneath the polished exterior. You don't understand. Appearances matter in our world. Richard Sr. is being considered for the federal bench. The right connections, the right impressions, they're everything. And the truth counts for nothing? The truth, she scoffed bitterly, is that everyone in our circle is doing the same thing, leveraging themselves to the hilt to maintain the lifestyle expected of them. It's how the game is played. It's a game my daughter may no longer want to play, I noted, glancing back toward Madison and Richard. Their conversation appeared to have reached some kind of conclusion. Madison was walking away, head high, while Richard remained rooted in place, staring after her. Judith followed my gaze, her face draining of color. What is she doing? Where is she going? The ceremony. I think you should prepare yourself for the possibility that there might not be a ceremony today, I suggested gently. Before Judith could respond, Madison was striding toward us across the manicured lawn, her expression resolute despite the tears streaking her cheeks. She had removed the veil I'd so carefully pinned, and her hair was now coming slightly undone, curls escaping in a way that reminded me powerfully of the little girl who once made mud pies in our backyard. Madison, darling, what's happening? Judith's voice was unnaturally high. The guests are arriving. The string quartet has started playing. Madison took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders. Mrs. Harrington, I'm very sorry, but there isn't going to be a wedding today. Judith swayed slightly, grabbing my arm for support, an irony that wasn't lost on me. What? No, that's impossible. Whatever disagreement you and Richard are having, it can be sorted out later. Right now, we have responsibilities, appearances to maintain. That's exactly the problem, Madison interrupted firmly. I'm tired of maintaining appearances. I'm tired of pretending to be someone I'm not. And I refuse to marry a man who thinks keeping up with the Harringtons is more important than honesty and financial responsibility. This is ridiculous, Judith sputtered. You can't just cancel a wedding of this magnitude. Do you have any idea how much we've invested in today? Who will be humiliated by this? I'm sorry for the embarrassment this will cause, Madison said, sounding genuinely regretful. But I'm not sorry for refusing to start my marriage with a lie. Judith turned to me, desperate for an ally. Talk to your daughter. Make her see reason. I looked from Judith's panicked face to Madison's tearful but determined expression. And in that moment, I knew exactly where I stood. I had spent weeks feeling hurt and rejected by my daughter, but here she was, choosing authenticity over appearances, substance over style. The Madison I had raised was still in there, finding her way back to her true self. Madison, I said carefully, are you absolutely certain this is what you want? Not the wedding, the life. Are you sure you don't want to be part of their world? She didn't hesitate. I'm sure. I want a life built on something real, not a facade that will crack the moment interest rates rise or the market shifts. I want a partner who values me for who I am, not what I represent. She reached for my hand. I want to be your daughter. Again, someone who isn't ashamed of where she came from, or the mother who sacrificed everything to give her choices. The knot that had been sitting in my chest for weeks finally loosened. Then I'm with you, whatever you decide to do next. Judith looked between us, incredulous. This is insanity. 200 guests. The governor, the reception, the cake. My masterpiece that had taken 3 days to create. Layers of delicate sponge, raspberry filling, champagne buttercream, and sugar flowers that had required hours of painstaking work. A decisive clarity washed over me. Mrs. Harrington, the cake is the least of your concerns right now, but I can assure you it won't go to waste. I turned to Madison. Do you need a few minutes alone, or would you like me to help you address the guests? She squeezed my hand gratefully. I need to do this myself. Richard has agreed to explain that we've mutually decided to postpone the wedding. It's not entirely a lie, just a kinder version of the truth. And after that? I asked gently. After that, I'd like to go home. Her voice caught on the word home, as if she wasn't sure she still had one with me. Of course, I assured her. My door is always open to you. It always has been. As Madison squared her shoulders and walked toward the gathering guests, I turned back to Judith, who looked shell-shocked. What happens now? She asked, her voice small and uncertain. Now, I said with quiet authority, my team will continue setting up for the reception, as contracted. You have 200 guests who have traveled to celebrate with your family. They'll need refreshments regardless of whether there's a wedding ceremony. You expect us to host a reception with no wedding. Judith looked horrified. I expect you to honor your contractual obligations, I corrected her. The food and service have been paid for. How you frame the event is entirely up to you. A celebration of Richard and Madison's journey, an elegant garden party, an opportunity to network with the governor. Whatever story you choose to tell. Judith stared at me, recognition slowly dawning in her eyes. You're enjoying this, aren't you? Watching us scramble to save face? I considered this accusation, then shook my head. No, Mrs. Harrington. I take no pleasure in anyone's humiliation, not even yours. What I do take satisfaction in is seeing my daughter choose authenticity over pretense, even when it's the harder path. Her lips thinned. How very noble of you both. It's not about nobility, I replied, turning to walk back toward the kitchen. It's about knowing what matters. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to inform my staff about the change in plans. Wait. Something in Judith's voice made me pause. She looked suddenly older, the carefully maintained facade cracking to reveal the weight of constant pretense. If we present this as a postponement rather than a cancellation, would you be willing to help us maintain that story? Just until the governor leaves? It was the closest thing to humility I'd ever seen from Judith Harrington. A recognition, however reluctant, that she needed my help. I will ensure that the service is flawless and the food exceptional, I promised. Beyond that, the story you tell is your business. But I would suggest, Mrs. Harrington, that the truth, or some version of it, might be more liberating than you imagine. She didn't respond, just nodded once before hurrying toward the main building, already pulling out her phone to coordinate damage control. I returned to the kitchen, where Maria and the team were putting final touches on the first course, unaware of the dramatic developments outside. There's been a change of plans, I announced calmly. The wedding ceremony has been postponed, but we will still be serving the full reception menu as contracted. Maria raised an eyebrow but asked no questions, one of the many reasons I valued. Her mind remains the same? Yes. First course at 5:30, as planned. I surveyed the kitchen, my domain where everything made sense, where skill and hard work produced tangible results. Also, I'll be stepping away for a few minutes once service begins. My daughter needs me. Of course, Maria nodded. We've got this under control. I moved through the kitchen, checking final preparations, adjusting a garnish here, tasting a sauce there. Everything was perfect, exactly as I had promised it would be. Professional to the core, regardless of personal circumstances. That was who I had always been. But today, I was also something else. A mother reclaiming her place in her daughter's life, standing firmly in the truth of who I was without apology or shame. At precisely 5:15, I removed my chef's coat, smoothed my hair, and changed into the simple but elegant navy dress I had brought just in case. The grandmother's pearls I had originally intended as Madison's wedding gift now adorned my own neck, not hidden in the kitchen, but visible for all to see. Richard Harrington Sr. was making some kind of announcement to the assembled guests as I stepped out of the kitchen. Something about postponing to ensure the perfect beginning to their life together, met with murmurs of surprise and confusion. I spotted Madison standing alone at the edge of the crowd, looking both devastated and relieved. The complicated emotions of a woman who had just made the hardest, bravest choice of her life. Without hesitation, I walked directly toward her, ignoring the curious glances and whispers that followed me across the room. Judith Harrington, standing rigidly beside her husband at the makeshift podium, saw me approaching Madison and momentarily froze mid-sentence. Let them look. Let them wonder. Let them see the woman they had deemed too embarrassing to attend this. Wedding now standing proudly beside her daughter in the aftermath of truth. Madison's face lit up when she saw me, relief washing over her features. "Mom," she whispered, reaching for my hand. "I'm so glad you're here." "I'm exactly where I belong," I assured her, squeezing her fingers gently. "And so are you." Together, we faced the crowd of elegantly dressed strangers who had come to witness a wedding, but would instead observe something far more meaningful. The moment when appearances gave way to authenticity, when a mother and daughter reclaimed their shared truth, standing side by side without shame or pretense. It wasn't the wedding day either of us had imagined. It was something infinitely more valuable. The beginning of a new chapter written on our own terms, not dictated by others' expectations or judgments. And that, I thought as I held my daughter's hand, was worth celebrating far more than any wedding could have been. 1 year after the wedding that wasn't, I stand in my newly expanded culinary studio watching Madison teach a group of aspiring chefs. Her hands move confidently as she demonstrates my grandmother's raspberry cake recipe, the same one that would have been her wedding cake. The canceled Harrington wedding became Boston's scandal of the season. Richard eventually married his ex-girlfriend, maintaining the illusion of wealth his family desperately clings to. The Harringtons avoided bankruptcy only by selling their historic home. Madison moved back into my guest room for 6 months, processing her narrow escape from a life built on appearances. Our healing wasn't instant, but it was genuine. Together, we expanded my catering business to include Sinclair Culinary Academy. Her business acumen paired with my culinary expertise, creating something neither of us could have built alone. Today, Madison wears my grandmother's pearls without embarrassment, as she teaches. No longer hiding her background or my influence, she proudly introduces me to her students. "This is Nancy Sinclair, master chef and my mother." I was never the embarrassment she feared. I was the foundation she needed. In finding her way back to that truth, she gave me the only gift that ever mattered: a daughter who finally sees her mother clearly. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.